thousands of protesters coming to Westminster. Did you manage to get out and meet them?
I did meet some farmers who came in. I spent 2 hours in front of a select committee, but I spoke to some farmers before I went into that. Of course I did. Despite the very difficult circumstances of the budget, we allocated £5 billion over the next 2 years for farming. That's the biggest ever budget in the country's history for sustainable farming. Services like the NHS that farmers use. Now, in order to do that, we've had to ask the wealthiest individuals and the very largest farms to pay their fair share.
The Office for Budget Responsibility has a warning. A new tax on farmers might not bring in the expected revenue. Why? Because older farmers can't easily restructure their affairs. But this dry financial forecast hides a more human story, one of desperation, protest, and a minister's fury at his fellow politicians. It's a tale that's about to unfold. Meet George, an 80-year-old farmer whose life's work is suddenly hanging in the balance. For decades, George has poured his heart and soul into his farm, weathering the ups and downs of agricultural life. But now, as he approaches his twilight years, a cruel twist of fate.
Well, I went and I spoke to farmers, and I put that to them today when I went out to meet some farmers on the protest. And they said, look, if you look at DEFRA's own figures, they say 2/3 of farms are worth over £1 million, so they will be impacted by this.
This is the key point. The Treasury numbers taken from HMRC, validated by the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility, show that no more than 500 farms would be affected in any year. Only 500 according to this data, and that's based on the last year for which we had actual hard data for claims. It shows that 3/4 of claimants will pay nothing.
Threatens to unravel everything he's built. The source of George's anguish, a potential inheritance tax bill that could exceed £1 million. It's a sum that would cripple his family and potentially force them to sell the very land George has tended for generations. But here's where the situation becomes almost unbearably cruel. If George passes away before April 26th, his family would owe nothing. After that date, they're on the hook for a debt that could destroy their legacy. This isn't just about money, though. The psychological toll on farmers like George is immense. Imagine spending your final days agonizing over whether your death might actually benefit your loved ones financially. It's a horrific choice that no one should have to face, let alone vulnerable individuals who've dedicated their lives to feeding the nation. But George isn't alone in this nightmare. The Tenant Farmers Association has sounded the alarm, warning that this so-called family farm tax could trigger a wave of mass renegotiations for agricultural tenancies. For many farmers, especially those renting their land, this could mean losing not just their livelihoods, but their homes as well. The minister, clearly moved by the plight of these farmers, didn't mince words when addressing the situation. He spoke of the unbearable pressure facing the agricultural community, highlighting the lack of support and planning for those affected by this abrupt tax change. Many farmers, he noted, had relied on promises that this tax wouldn't be altered. Now, they find themselves scrambling to restructure their affairs with precious little time to do so. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of this crisis is the one that often goes unspoken. The minister, with a heavy heart, revealed that some farmers are considering the unthinkable, taking their own lives rather than leaving their families in crippling debt. It's a stark reminder of the very real human cost behind these policy decisions. As the April 26th deadline looms ever closer, the pressure on farmers like George intensifies. The Office for Budget Responsibility has warned that older farmers, in particular, may struggle to reorganize their finances quickly enough to avoid severe consequences. With each passing day, the clock ticks louder for these vulnerable individuals caught in a tax trap not of their own making. While older farmers like George grapple with immediate financial peril, a silent threat is eroding the very foundation of Britain's agricultural future. Meet Gemma, a young farmer whose dreams are being crushed before they've even had a chance to take root. Her story might just shatter your assumptions about the future of British agriculture. Gemma represents a generation of young farmers who should be the lifeblood of Britain's rural communities. These are the individuals who were supposed to carry on family legacies, innovate farming practices, and ensure the nation's food security for decades to come. Instead, they're watching helplessly as their family farms crumble under the weight of the family farm tax. The consequences of this tax go far beyond individual families. It's forcing the breakup and sale of farms that have been in families for generations. But what happens when these agricultural cornerstones are split apart or sold off to the highest bidder? The ripple effects on rural communities could be catastrophic. Imagine entire villages where farming has been the economic and cultural backbone for centuries. Now picture those same villages with their farms carved up, sold off, or left fallow. It's not just about nostalgia or tradition, it's about the very survival of rural Britain. But the crisis doesn't stop at the village boundary. The confidence of the entire farming sector is in free fall. At the Yorkshire Agricultural Machinery Show, a tractor dealer reported a significant reduction in orders for new tractors and machinery. This isn't just farmers tightening their belts, it's a sign of an industry losing faith in its own future. And here's where things get truly alarming. If Britain's farmers can't invest in their operations, can't pass on their farms to the next generation, and can't see a viable future in agriculture, what does that mean for the nation's food supply? It's a question that's got even the biggest players in the food industry worried. Tesco, along with other major supermarket chains, has joined the fight against the family farm tax. Why would a retail giant wade into this debate? Because they understand that this isn't just about individual farmers or rural communities, it's about Britain's ability to feed itself. Tesco's chief commercial officer didn't mince words. This is not just a debate about individual policies. The UK's future food security is at stake. When supermarkets start sounding the alarm about food security, it's time to sit up and take notice. Even the Office for Budget Responsibility, hardly known for alarmist statements, has assigned a high uncertainty rating to the Treasury's costings for the tax. They've warned that the revenue raised may not meet expectations due to unpredictable responses from farmers. In other words, this tax could trigger a crisis in the agricultural sector without even achieving its financial goals. The minister's outrage over Labour's dismal turnout at the farming debate speaks volumes. With only 4 Labour MPs bothering to show up, it's clear where their priorities lie. This absence isn't just a political misstep, it's a slap in the face to rural communities across Britain. It sends a damaging message that Labour can't be bothered with the concerns of farmers and their families. But let's not let this setback define the fight for Britain's agricultural future. It's time for action, not just empty seats in Parliament. If you care about the food on your table and the future of our countryside, make your voice heard. Support your local farmers, buy British produce, and demand that your MPs take rural issues seriously. The battle for Britain's farming heritage is far from over. In fact, it's just beginning, and it's a fight we can't afford to lose.